My name's Justin Ball, and right now I'm a second-year graduate student at Texas State University. I'm also working as an intern for the UNESCO World Heritage Office in San Antonio, Texas. I've been working with the city of San Antonio in the Mission Historic District. Essentially, around the 5 missions that are located in San Antonio, Texas, there's a buffer zone, and it's my office's job to go in and redevelop that area. And they're trying to improve it in order to foster tourism. I originally took the internship. They offered me a part in the project revamping the signage at the Mission Trails National Park in San Antonio. Their signage, most of it was put up in the 1970s, and it's fallen into disrepair. And there are signs from about 5 different historical organizations that are all located in that general vicinity. And some of them contradict one another. Some of them have just fallen into disrepair, and you can't even read them anymore. So I took the job on to kind of normalize all of the signage. A little bit from each of the organizations. It's a collaborative process, and hopefully we'll get some new signage up that will be much easier for tourists to navigate the Mission Trails National Parks. So the Mission Trails National Park is actually a chain. There are 5 missions, one of which is the Alamo. Essentially, in the 17th and 18th century, the Spanish government sent missionaries to Texas to turn the Indians into Spanish subjects. They built this series of missions along the river to expand the influence of the Spanish Empire, although the area that they built them in was never really the focus of the Spanish Empire because there was no silver or gold in Texas. So their presence here was limited to these missions. But they were relatively successful in bringing in some of the native populations and converting them to Christianity and turning them into loyal Spanish subjects. Last semester I undertook an exhibit that was over Texas prison history. I ended up taking the project on and designing an entire exhibit from the ground up. I covered the history of the Texas state prisons from 1836 through 2017. It was a very interesting experience, to say the least. So last summer I took on a job as a site interpreter at the Alamo. Essentially, it was my job to interact with tourists. So I essentially walked around in a garden all day and talked about history, which was an ideal job for me at the time. I learned a lot, became a bit of a subject matter expert on Alamo history, and became really interested in black powder artillery. So after I worked the summer job at the Alamo, my ultimate goal was actually to work there. So in order to stay on the radar, this past February and March, I volunteered to do reenactments for the battle commemoration ceremonies. The first event that I took part in was called A Night with Heroes, and essentially it was a community theater project. I played Green B. Jameson, who was the engineer in charge of the Alamo. I had a few speaking lines. It was a lot of fun. After that, I did the Immortal 32 commemoration. Essentially, the Immortal 32 were the 32 men from Gonzales, Texas, who were the only reinforcement that the garrison at the Alamo received during the siege. It was an interesting experience. I would say that reenactments are important to give people a sense of what it actually was like, the clothes that people wore, the different arms that they carried. It's difficult to convey that in a way that especially small children understand by just looking at, say, a flintlock rifle in a case. Kids And adults too like seeing things, they like being able to hold them. They do live fire demonstrations at the Alamo, and people really enjoy those. It's just a really great way to engage with the public. So I've always been really interested in history. I mean, I can remember when I was a little kid, I owned all of the Disney Davy Crockett books. There was this box set. It was a pretty expensive thing, but I had these things and I probably wore them out. I read them so many times. Also, every year my family would take a vacation during the summer, and we would trade years. My brother would get to choose one year. We'd always end up going to Disneyland or something like that. And on the years that I got to choose, we would inevitably end up in a Civil War battleground. We went to Gettysburg one year. Another year, I dragged my family to Washington, D.C. to go to the National Mall and to the Smithsonian Institute. So, I mean, I've always been drawn to history. It's just some innate thing with me that I kind of strayed from a long time. I mean, I was a medic in the Army. After the military, I went to paramedic school, and while I was going through that, I came to the realization that what I was doing was making me miserable. So I went ahead and put an application into Texas State University and have been doing that ever since.